Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are back here at Back in the Game podcast. I am your host, Todd Chase Jr. For this episode, our co-host Adam Chapman, not currently here at the moment, so it's we don't know if he's going to join us here in today's episode or not. We were supposed to do this episode yesterday, but we had some other things kind of come up throughout the week to where we couldn't do it yesterday, so we're just going to dive right into this today and start with the college football portion of this episode. The top 25, after a really good week one, looks like this. You got number 25, you have Iowa. UCLA coming in at 24. Washington State at 23. Miami, Florida, I believe, at 22. Duke at 21. North Carolina at 20. Oklahoma at 19. Colorado at 18. They just had a huge win over Nebraska last week. Ole Miss at 17. Oregon State at 16. Kansas State at 15. LSU at 14. Oregon at 13. Utah at 12. Tennessee at 11. And Alabama, after losing to Texas, drops all the way to number 10. Notre Dame is at number 9. Washington is at 8. Penn State at 7. Ohio State at 6. USC at 5. Texas jumps all the way to number 4. Florida State, I mean, I don't even know what school that is anymore. They're at number 3. Michigan will stay at number 2, and Georgia will stay at number 1. Now, I don't see Georgia and Michigan actually changing the 1-2 position. I mean, they may flip flop here and there depending on the week, but I don't see them moving anything up until closer to the end of the season. You know, Georgia playing Alabama. You've got Michigan playing Ohio State, Michigan playing Michigan State. That game is always good, no matter what the records are. I mean, Michigan State could be 1-7 and could end up beating them for all I know. Um, obviously Michigan and Ohio State at the end over Thanksgiving weekend is always one that Michigan tries to come out on top of. That could actually, depending on how Georgia does that week, Michigan could actually jump them depending on how that game goes. So, I know we've got some really good games again this week, especially in the Big Ten. You got Washington traveling to Michigan State. That'll be on Peacock. Michigan, I believe, plays. Um, I don't remember who Michigan plays. It's another. It's another school that they could easily win against. Some other schools, like I believe Iowa, or no, Iowa, Illinois and Penn State, or Indiana and Penn State, whoever they're playing. Some of those schools actually start some of the Big Ten conference play. Other schools start Big Ten conference play next week. Um, I know Colorado plays Colorado State, which will be another really good game. But man, Coach Prime, he's got his team in the prime seat of climbing up the ranks here in the college football world. And I mean, if Alabama some way somehow ends up fumbling another game, for instance, when they play Tennessee, if Tennessee does end up coming away with being able to, you know, end up winning by like, I don't know, 30-27 or something like that, Alabama could probably, as a two-loss school, could probably not even make it into the New Year's Six games or the college football playoffs. So, and with the college football playoffs, this year being the final year where they're going to take the top four schools. Next year it'll be, I believe, the top 12 in the rankings will go. Um, that's going to be difficult for Alabama because you know if they end up losing that second game and they don't get into the playoffs, then you really have to question. You can't really question Nick Saban. Nick Saban, he's a college football god. I don't care what you say. He's a college football god. He will always have a job. But you start questioning some of the other staff at Alabama, and if they can't get that done, and there may be some changes down there at Alabama. But no, I'm looking forward to this weekend's games. Tell you another thing that I was really looking forward to was last night's NFL game. You had the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles. We're gonna switch right to the NFL. Um, so you had that game last night. Man, what a game that was! At one point, it was 27-7 Philadelphia, and it pretty much looked like Kirk Cousins was about to give up, but his offense said, "No, I got you, bro," and they started chipping away at it. Another thing that contributed into Philadelphia winning last night's game 34 to 28 was their run game. Yes, they did throw a couple long passes to Devontae Smith, to AJ Brown, um, but outside of those couple of big chunk plays, I believe Jalen Hurts threw a 54 yarder and a 63 yarder. The 63 yarder to Devontae Smith actually resulted in a touchdown. The 54 yarder to Devontae Smith was in the first quarter, and that got him to the 10-yard line. But it kind of looked like at the beginning that this game was actually going to be kind of like one of those ground and pound games, and they proved it. I mean, I think DeAndre Swift had over like 165 yards himself. Uh, they actually did this without Kenneth Gainwell, who had a rib injury coming from last week, which I really didn't know about until I started watching that game last night. And, they ended up losing Boston Scott throughout the game. I don't really know quite what the injury is. I believe at one point they were checking him for a concussion. I didn't hear anything on if he had, passed that concussion protocol test initially. But so they were pretty much down to DeAndre Swift and Penny, and between the two, they ended up finishing it off. It wasn't pretty. Yeah, Jalen Hurts did throw an interception, which you know he he he's better than that, but everybody makes mistakes. You know, um, but I tell you what, the Minnesota offense, special teams, you know, they have got to hold that ball. In the first quarter, I kid you not, Minnesota had three turnovers, an interception, and two fumbles, one of which was on the special teams after a punt that could have set them up in a really good position. I believe it was inside like the 40 or 30-yard line of Philadelphia. And had they started chipping away at it, like they did starting in that third quarter, if they'd have started doing that in the second quarter, I think this game would have been a different story. Yes, you would have had your turnovers and stuff like that, but I think it was just a matter of time of possession. I remember seeing at one point Philadelphia had like almost 38 minutes compared uh to Minnesota's like 12 or 13 minutes of time of possession. And that's just Philadelphia in itself. They like to equal the playing field by keeping the opponent quarterback on the sideline. And you know how you do that? Sustaining 12, 13, 14, 15 play drives that last 7, 8, 9 minutes long. I mean, there were a couple of times where it was fourth down and one, and they had to, do a QB sneak just to get across the line because at some points Minnesota's defense was good, but uh, they crumbled. The It's the typical, you know, Minnesota Vikings in prime time, and a lot that's got to do with Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins is still a good quarterback. He just, I don't know if it's just he's just not that mobile anymore because one interesting stat that I heard last night was earlier in his career, and I believe, and I should know this being a fan of another team in the NFC North, Kirk Cousins got hit a lot in the early part of his career. So for him to be less mobile, I don't blame him because he's been hit so many times. The biggest issue, I think, though, is the offensive line for Minnesota. I don't see this team. Everybody's saying Minnesota's going to win 10 or more games. I don't see it happening, especially with the way that offensive line is playing right now. There's no way. I mean, they'll be lucky if they even win 5 games at this point right now. You know, one good thing that they have working for them is Justin Jefferson. I believe he had 115 yards passing. TJ Hawkinson had 2 touchdowns. I believe Justin Jefferson had one, and so did KJ Osborne. So, I mean, they shared the ball quite a bit, but Justin Jefferson right away established the room that he needed against Darius Slay last night, right on the opening possession. Ran a slant, was at least 2 or 3 yards distance from him and Darius Slay, and which is really weird seeing Darius Slay being beat on a play like that because he is the one of the best corners you could ever have in this league. I mean, I know he's left Detroit. That ship has sailed, and I'm happy for him. He's got his Super Bowl ring in Philly, but at this point, do you start talking? Is it just because Justin Jefferson is faster than him, or is he is he starting to slow down a little bit? You know, I don't know what it is exactly. I don't have the numbers in front of me of what Kirk Cousins QBR was last night. What Darius Slay allowed last night. I know it wasn't much, and I know 115 yards is a lot. But the main reason why Justin Jefferson got most of those yards is they took him off of Darius Slay at some points of that game, and that's how he was able to get some more separation on that way. That way too. But and we didn't. We did an episode last week, but we had technical issues. I didn't have my mic turned on, so that was my part, or that was my issue last week. I apologize. That issue is fixed. Obviously, you could tell, but Detroit last week went into Arrowhead, smacked them in the mouth, ended up winning. Yes, it was by 1 point, but that was a statement game. That was our that was our Super Bowl to start the season off. And yes, you could say there was an asterisk. I don't think so. It doesn't matter, who you got playing for you. What really matters are, the plays that you call and the adjustments that you make during the games. And I believe Ben Johnson and um, Dan Campbell made the necessary changes to ultimately, you know, let them beat the Kansas City Chiefs by 1 point. Now, do I think the Lions are going to the Super Bowl? I think we can pump the brakes on that right now. We just got to take 1 week at a time. But Kansas City is going to be fine. This one loss, you got people in Kansas City right now who is calling for Andy Reid's head, Patrick Mahomes to be traded or be benched or all that kind of stuff. No, no. It's one bad game. You will be just fine. In fact, I can actually see them using this loss and riding it out all the way back to the Super Bowl next year. The end of this year. I could actually see them, going 16-1 and that being their only loss. But as far as the Lions go, you can't look too far ahead. You do have a favorable schedule in the next 5 to 6 games. You just, you don't. You can talk trash, but don't be overconfident enough to where you're overplaying your plays. Just go into each game one at a time. Take care of business one game at a time, one play at a time, and however the game ends is how the game ends. You know, I will say this is not the same old Lions. This is a different Lions team, and you know, I think we're gonna be in for a really good season. So, the Patriots, on the other hand, they got a really big game coming up. I believe they play Miami next, so that'll be a big game. Um, a lot of other big games. I'm interested to seeing how Joe Burrow does after last week. I believe they play the Ravens this week. Can he get back into the rhythm like we're used to seeing Joe Burrow? I know he was out. Excuse me. He was out during some of the preseason. I know he didn't play during the preseason, but during training camp and stuff, he was out with a lower leg injury that I do think had somewhat of an issue with him last week, which means, the time that he missed, he didn't get that time to spend with uh, Jamar Chase and, you know, Tyler Higbee and all these other players. I think that's part of the issue. So now with having that 1 week under their belt, they've got this week against the Ravens, which is another really good team that I could actually see them losing to if they're not careful. I really could see that. So that's a little bit of the NFL stuff. We're just rolling through this stuff, getting through it. Um let's see here. What else can we talk about today? It may be a little bit of a shorter episode today. Um let's go ahead and talk about fantasy football. Last week I know I lost my game. We had some really good games last week in fantasy football. We've got another good week this week. I know with the game that happened last night, I know I'm up 33 points to 12 points right now. And mine, I'm projected 114 and a half to 107.3. So, I mean, anything could happen with fantasy football, but it just you can't predict how some of these players are going to play. Josh Allen last week, he didn't play that great. So, there I do know in our fantasy football league there were a lot of transactions this week, and I expect if some of these big name players like Joe Burrow, like Josh Allen, like Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, some of them players that don't put up really good plays or really good points, I can actually see some of uh, these players in fantasy football dropping them and trying to you know try to figure out their team. So just a quick little episode this week. I know this is not normally your typical episode with us, but looks like it's just going to be really, really short. Anyways, I'm going to sign off for the day. You guys have a great weekend. Take care, and God bless.